Well, I mean, there are clearly some very influential voices in his ear, Golly, that have been driving this for the last several months. And they include, without question, Joel Pollak of Breitbart News, who writes extensively on Breitbart News about the plight of Afrikaner farmers in South Africa. There are other figures, possibly Elon Musk, who has his own reasons for pursuing an agenda of opposition to the South African government, who undoubtedly has, certainly within the last several months in Washington, D.C., had immediate access to the President of the United States. But these voices have definitely succeeded in persuading President Trump that there is a genocide taking place in South Africa, that Afrikaner farmers are actively being expropriated of their farms without compensation. In other words, that the Expropriation Act is already being used to see those events occur. And I think it's really important to explain that what we're witnessing in Washington, the arrival of these 49 Afrikaners, they landed at Dulles Airport about an hour and a half ago. The flight came in early. Is absolutely unprecedented, because you have a situation where President Trump has basically closed America's borders to virtually all refugees, but almost the only people that he is allowing into the country, and not just allowing them in, fast-tracking their arrival in the United States, are these 49 Afrikaners. With the President of the United States, they're saying they're all being immediately granted American citizenship. They're going to relocate to a dozen states across the country, we believe, including California, New York, and West Virginia. And when the President said there that they happen to be white, he's not letting them in because of their race. Race doesn't come into it. Well, race, for him, clearly comes into it, because as he's throwing America's doors open to these 49 Afrikaners, the doors of the same United States are absolutely closed to refugees from conflict zones, including the DRC, Sudan, and many other parts of the world where non-white people are suffering at the hands of oppressors. And President Trump is choosing to argue that what is taking place in South Africa is a genocide. It's an astonishing position to come to, and it's going to be unbelievably challenging for President Ramaphosa and top South African officials when they meet President Trump, apparently next week. It's going to be extraordinarily difficult for them to overcome what is now, in his mind, a fixed viewpoint. Genocide is happening in South Africa. Farms are being expropriated without compensation.
Question is then, Simon, what kind of reception might President Ramaphosa get and his delegation to the White House, if indeed this meeting is taking place next week? And what would be the content of the discussions?
Look, I think they'll get a courteous reception. I mean, Donald Trump is courteous to visitors. He was courteous to President Volodymyr Zelensky when he arrived at the White House. It was when the Ukrainian leader was sitting down in the Oval Office in front of the cameras that everything started to go awry. And there's the danger for President Ramaphosa. Because Donald Trump uses these White House visits, and we don't know that this is taking place at the White House, but Donald Trump uses these interactions with foreign leaders as an opportunity for him to be the showman on camera. Traditionally, foreign leaders arrive, they sit down alongside the President of the United States, whether it's in the Oval Office or at another location. There is a brief welcome. They both make brief opening remarks, and then the cameras are all invited to leave. They've had the pictures of the two men sitting side by side that they can use in news programs like this one for several hours to come. And then the real talk gets underway. That is not the way things operate in Donald Trump's White House. Last week, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney had to endure a 35-minute made-for-television impromptu press conference that Donald Trump put him through. And you could see etched in the face of the Canadian Prime Minister and the faces of members of his delegation real irritation because they had come to Washington to have substantive, nuanced, complicated conversations, and they didn't want to have those conversations on camera. But first, Mr. Carney had to endure the Trump show for 35 minutes. And it's in those 35 minutes, or in the case of Volodymyr Zelensky's experience, more than an hour, that things can go very badly wrong. So it's going to take all of President Ramaphosa's diplomatic guile to find a way of navigating that, and then getting to the closed-door talks where the South African delegation will have an opportunity to try and correct what is misinformation that the American president is trafficking. I'll also make one more point, Golly, briefly, which is that the composition of the White House press corps has changed now. Donald Trump has packed that White House with representatives of loyal, right-leaning, sympathetic media houses, and they become factors in the question and answer session that takes place because they're constantly lobbing President Trump softballs, and in some cases, reporters suspect they are lobbing President Trump planted questions so that he can say the things that he wants to say on camera.
Very interesting indeed. Simon, very briefly as I let you go, so the 49 Afrikaners, at least at the moment we understand the flight has landed. Is Washington the final destination, or might they end up elsewhere?
Yeah, they're going to fan out to about a dozen states across the country. Some of them apparently have family members in the United States that are preparing to receive them. Others will find themselves literally beginning a new life in a whole variety of diverse locations. We've been told California, New York, and West Virginia are on the list. They will be receiving food parcels, clothing, cleaning supplies, prepaid mobile phones that will be supplied to them. That's a sort of a packet of aid that is given to any refugee that arrives in the United States to get them through the first few days of their transition. But again, it's important to underscore they are basically the only refugees currently arriving in the United States, which makes these events all the more extraordinary and redolent of the fact that we are now witnessing the lowest point in the bilateral relationship between any American government and any South African government, including governments during the apartheid era.
Simon Marks, our Washington correspondent, speaking to us from London tonight. Thank you very much for your time.